Well, in that case, then, how much influence do our genes actually have on us? Because we hear with things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder that quite often there is a genetic link there. But is this the same with, for example, anxiety and depression? Is it that there's still a genetic link, but it's not as prominent, or is there not as much of a genetic link there at all?
Okay, well, just say if we look first at things like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, there's a fair bit of evidence that people are more prone to developing, for example, schizophrenia if they have certain types of genes. And there have been a number of genes that have been identified with that, but mainly the way that these studies are done is showing that identical twins share, say, the experience of schizophrenia more than fraternal twins. Non-identical twins might show. So that shows that there's a certain genetic loading. But there again, there've been, say, triplets in the past who were identical triplets. One might have developed schizophrenia, one might have developed a bipolar disorder, and another triplet might not have developed any condition at all. So this shows that there's more to it than just whether people have certain genes. And the way we tend to think of it these days is it also depends on, for example, the environment or stress or experiences that might influence whether certain problematic genes are switched on or not. So there was a model developed called a stress diathesis model. A diathesis means like a disposition, like a biological disposition to develop a particular problem, say schizophrenia. But maybe you need a certain level of stress or a certain challenge in environmental experiences or things that happen in your life that then trigger those genes from then operating in a way that causes the problem in the first place. So it's not just about our genetic makeup. It's also about things that happen that might switch these genes on or switch them off. And a similar thing with anxiety and depression. We now know that there are thousands of genes involved in anxiety and depression, and they tend to be pretty much the same ones. There might be some discriminating differences between the different types of genes, but there's a lot of overlap. So there's the notion about whether particular problematic genes might be switched on or switched off. But there's also this notion that they express themselves in different ways or manifest in different ways or show up in different kind of ways or don't show up at all, depending on other kind of factors as well. So one of the main things is not to get sucked into this idea of, oh, I've been having a really difficult time, I've been dealing with depression, or I've been diagnosed with a psychotic condition. That means I must have these terrible genes and there's nothing much I can do about it, I'm doomed. It's having an understanding that there are things that make a difference to whether these genes are switched on or switched off, and other ways of compensating for those kind of difficulties. We can influence our biology more than previously accepted.
Well, that is interesting because the implication there in terms of if environmental factors can influence whether, say, negative genes are switched on, that potentially means also that environmental factors can influence whether positive genes are switched on as well. And so that's where I suppose what we're talking about today is partly about a bit of a recipe for switching on some of those, say, positive genes.